Let's say China.
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 A China.
China.
In China.
You go over to China.
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 A China.
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 Hi, my name is Eileen, and this is Chinese Explained. Today in our episode, we're gonna look closer into my favorite thing ever, which is Chinese characters. Just before we start, I want to let you know that today's video is going to be divided into two parts. The first one, fully available on YouTube, is going to be about Chinese characters, history, origins and calligraphy. The second one, available only in our upcoming online course, is going to be about basic characteristics and types of Chinese characters. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Legendary origins. According to a legend, Chinese characters were invented by Cai Nze, a bureaucrat under the legendary Yellow Emperor. Inspired by his study of the animals of the world, the landscape of the earth and the stars in the sky, Cai Nze is said to have invented symbols called Zi, the first Chinese characters. The legend relates that on the day the characters were created, rain rained down from the sky, and that night the people heard ghosts wailing and demons crying, because human beings could no longer be cheated. How old exactly are Chinese characters? The earliest confirmed evidence of the Chinese script yet discovered is the body of inscriptions carved on bronze vessels and oracle bones from the late Shang dynasty. The earliest of this is dated to around 1200 BC, so that makes Chinese characters over 3200 years old. What do we mean by simplified and traditional characters? Most simplified Chinese characters in use today are the result of the works moderated by the government of the People's Republic of China in the 1950s and 60s. Cao Shu, cursive written text, was the inspiration of some simplified characters, and for others some are attested as early as the Qin dynasty. Traditional cultures and values such as Confucianism were challenged and often blamed for problems in China. Soon, people started to cite the traditional Chinese writing system as an obstacle in modernizing China and proposed to reform them. It was suggested that the Chinese writing system should be either simplified or completely abolished. Liu Xuan, a renowned Chinese author in the 20th century, stated that if Chinese characters are not destroyed, then China will die. Chinese characters were quite often blamed for the economic problems in China during that time. In 1935, 324 simplified characters collected by Qian Xuantong were officially introduced as a table of the first batch of simplified characters, but they were suspended in 1936. The People's Republic of China issued its first round of official character simplifications in two documents, the first in 1956 and the second in 1964. Currently, the only non-Chinese language outside of China that regularly uses the Chinese script is Japanese. Vietnam abandoned their use in the early 20th century in favor of a Latin-based script, and Korea in the late 20th century in favor of its homegrown Hangul script. Although, as it happened quite recently, many Koreans still learn them to read text written in Chinese characters. Traditional versus simplified characters. The use of traditional Chinese characters versus simplified Chinese characters varies greatly. Since the 1950s, the People's Republic of China has officially adopted simplified Chinese characters for use in mainland China, while Hong Kong, Macau, and the Republic of China, Taiwan, were not affected by the reform. There is no absolute rule for using either system. Singapore underwent 3 successive rounds of character simplification, and this resulted in some difference between Singapore's simplified characters and those from mainland China. Malaysia started teaching a set of simplified characters at school in 1981, which were also completely identical to the mainland China simplification. Chinese newspapers in Malaysia are published in either set of characters, typically with the headlines in traditional Chinese, while the body is in simplified Chinese. Although in both countries the use of simplified characters is universal among the younger Chinese generation, a large majority of the older Chinese generation still uses the traditional characters. Chinese shop signs are also generally written in traditional characters. Calligraphy. The art of writing Chinese characters is called Chinese calligraphy. It is usually done with ink brushes. In ancient China, Chinese calligraphy was one of the 4 arts of the Chinese scholars. There is a set of rules of Chinese calligraphy. Each character has a set number of brush strokes. None can be added or taken away from the character. Strict regularity is not required, meaning the strokes may be emphasized using personal style. Calligraphy was the means by which scholars could mark their thoughts and teachings for immortality. So, that's it for today's episode. If you wish to know more about types of Chinese characters, how many Chinese characters are out there, and how many should you know, don't forget to follow us on YouTube and Instagram. Link in the description below. If you have any question, just leave a comment below and for sure I'll get back to you.